I'm Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Training. Welcome to our video session today by Rick Wells. Rick is a board-certified pastoral counselor with Behavioral Therapy Center. He has his master's in pastoral counseling from Liberty Baptist, and he is a candidate, PhD candidate, in counseling psychology at Louisiana Baptist University. Rick is married to Cheryl, and she is a licensed professional counselor in North and South Carolina. They have 2 daughters and 2 granddaughters. And so Rick is an adjunct professor and has taught communications at Furman University's here in Greenville. He's an instructor in couples communications, core communication, and a certified facilitator for Prepare, Enrich, and the DISC model of human behavioral assessments. He served both as a pastor of care and an advanced certified human behavior consultant and certified leadership training specialist. And so, Rick, I'm so glad that you're here and that you're willing to invest your years of expertise and wisdom to be able to help these pastors and their leadership staff to figure out how they're going to go about dealing with the blended families in their ministries.
Thank you, Marshall, and I apologize for the upfront. It's interesting in our world of technology sometimes as to what computers control us and what little control we have sometimes, and whether we're looking at visual basic or basic visual or what color scheme. I think we're there now, and I think we're ready to talk a little bit about communication. And I do think we want to spend some time today. We want to look at the area of communication from 2 points. You know, we've been talking about how do we, as pastors and those in ministries that are working with step families, how do we become more effective in helping our step families become effective? And as in all of life, we have challenges, and a lot of these challenges are created or cured by the effective or ineffective communication skills we have. So today, I just want to spend a few minutes on looking at 2 aspects of the communication process that we can bring into the counseling process as pastors and, again, lay ministers with our families that are struggling. And actually, today's presentation is going to be applicable to all people and all families in general. But once again, our focus is on step families. And the first part, we're going to talk about how do we become an effective communicator for our kids in a step family environment or when divorce has been present. And then secondly, we're going to look at how do we become effective communicators with our partner and be able to come to what I call resolution of issues. I don't like the word collaboration because collaboration and compromise, especially, I'm sorry, Marshall, it's really more compromise. Because compromise, I still feel that someone has felt like they had to give up or lose something. But what we're looking for is collaborative resolution, where there is such a thing as a win-win scenario out there. And in communication, we can come to collaborative resolutions. So as we get started today, the first topic we want to just spend a few minutes on is how to become a communication-friendly parent. And, you know, a lot of people out there think that communication is doing what I'm doing right now, and that is talking, when in fact, talking is a very small part of what communication really is. Listening is the most effective way to be a good communicator. And pastors, I want to emphasize this as we're looking at and are helping our families out there. And if they say either my kids and I can't communicate, my wife and I cannot communicate, well, let's really keep our ears open and make sure we're hearing the first possible skill set that's not there, and that is the listening skill set. But right now, as we're talking about being communication-friendly parents, we have to be sure that we're available to listen to our kids. So when we say really listen to the child, and as we are counseling our parents, we don't want them just to act if they're listening. We want to be sure that they understand they have to resist distractions, they have to ask questions, and they have to give feedback. Such statements as, I see, go on, what else? And then they want to paraphrase what the youngster has said in their own in your own words, just to be sure that we as the parent understand and that we can assure the child that we understand. Now, in the old world of counseling psychology, they used to call that parroting, like the bird, the parrot. But actually, I think parroting is actually demeaning in a way, because if we repeat back word for word what we heard someone said, it's almost like we're mocking them. I don't know if you remember when you were kids, and if you had a big brother or a big sister or a younger brother or a younger sister, the best way to get on their nerves was to start repeating everything they said. So an application of skill set here would not be if you heard your child say, Dad or Mom, I don't think anybody really understands what it's like to have to move and go to a new school. You know, we're not saying, again, parrot. So let's take, if you were trained that way, let's take that out of our head. Because we're not going to say, okay, what I heard you say is, I don't think anybody will understand what it's like. It almost becomes, like I said, mocking. What we want to say is, okay, son or daughter, what I heard you say is that you're really challenged and you don't believe that Mom or Dad or anybody in this family understands what it's like to be you, to have to change the school year in the middle of the year, or what it's like to have to go to a new school next year because of this new family. We want to use what are called door openers to encourage children to talk. And this is from Dr. Thomas Gordon, who is considered the father of parent effectiveness training. And again, when he says door openers, and examples we're talking about is, tell me about it. You know, I would be interested in your point of view. Shoot, I'm listening. And it sounds like you've got something to say about this. If the child is usually too guarded, and we're going to see this once again, but I want to also put this emphasis on here. If you notice, those are all what we call open-ended questions. We're not going to ask questions that have yes or no answers to them. And we're going to emphasize this again in a few seconds. But a lot of times we're going to find that the child is usually guarded to share its feelings. I don't know, you know, for this listening audience, how you grew up, but I knew when I was growing up, probably the thing I hated the most was when my parents wanted to quote unquote talk to me and get to know me better. And, you know, we'd sit down in a formal living room, and it was that movie Love Story. That if you ever remember that Love Story movie where the son who was going to Harvard and he had the father who was, you know, very successful business-wise, but they never had a bond between the two of them. And even in watching that movie, it was just awkward to see how uncomfortable it was to have those two grown men sit down and talk to each other. Well, we're not talking about grown men. We're talking about kids, so you can imagine how much more awkward it would be. So here are some ideas that you could share with your parents in step families as you're doing the counseling. And first one is, take the attention off the fact that you're looking for a meaningful communication. So we're not going to sit them down in that formal living room or formal dining room and make ourselves available and say, let's talk. One suggestion is get involved together in an activity that is engrossing but doesn't take all the child's concentration. And some of the suggestions are such as playing a board game or baking cookies. And then while the attention is focused on the activity, you'll notice that their defenses are down, and you can start subtly sneaking in probing questions. We do want to avoid questions that can answer with one word, because one-word answers are all you're going to get, and we just spoke about that. We definitely do not want yes, no answers. So what we're saying to do, instead, phrase the question in an open-ended manner that encourage this child or children to elaborate. And here are some examples that you can see and make application with in your counseling ministry. Is, so tell me, what do you think about that? Or tell me about that. Tell me what you did at. And then one word of caution I do have here is be specific. Be specific. Two general questions such as, tell me about school is likely to get you a blank stare or a shrug. Or what do you want to know? Now, I know that's how I grew up, is what did you do in school today? Nothing. Oh, okay, that was always the end of the conversation, and I will admit that I probably carried that over a lot with my girls when they were growing up. What happened to school today? Oh, nothing. Or this or that. Instead of specific questions, what classes did you have? Well, today we had our sociology class. Well, what did you study in sociology? We were studying, and whatever the subject matter is, and just bringing out the right questions to get the right answers. A big key here is, as parents, if they have a tendency to lecture, interrogate, or criticize, we need to coach them on working very hard on changing their habits. Now, once again, pastors and those in the ministries, we will see it many times, and we'll see it long before our parents will see it. They'll say, no, I don't lecture my children, or I don't interrogate our children, or we don't criticize our children, but we will see it first. So we have to softly be able to bring this to their attention and let them know that, yeah, you do, and here are some ideas that maybe we can help change that. We know that if we're going to be either critical or lecturing or interrogating, they're going to break down the lines of communication. So we want to help those that we counsel recognize this and coach them on how to do it. But we also want to ask them to tune into any questions that are divorce-related and use them as an opening to talk about the child's concerns or feelings. We're always going to work with our parents to help them, to remind them that they can remind their children that they're always willing to answer their questions and talk about their feelings and concerns. Now, here's the potential big red flag here is if the parents say this but they're not willing to do it, they're going to lose the opportunity of ever in the future getting that sense of security with their children or their children believing them. So we want our parents to understand they have to share this with their children, but they have to also follow through, and the acts, as they say, actions speak louder than words. And so their actions are going to have to be there, that when the child comes to them wanting to ask them questions related to a divorce, that the parents are truly, that we're going to be talking about the biological parent, is truly going to be available and willing to talk about their questions, but more importantly, their feelings and concerns. Where I want to go with this also is we don't ever want to invalidate our child's feelings or concerns. It's easy as parents, if a child comes up and says, I really don't like, and if the new husband's Mr. Sammy or the new wife is Miss Julie, I really don't like Mr. Sammy or Miss Julie. I don't think they like us. Well, you will immediately lose. Let me rephrase it. We want our parents to understand that if they don't validate that feeling with their children and saying, I understand that you may feel that way. Now, we're not saying that they understand or that they're right, because Mr. Sammy or Miss Julie may be having the same challenge as saying, I don't know how I'm going to get through to your kids and get a relationship with them. So we're not validating that they're right. We're just validating the feelings and concerns they have. I understand how you may feel like this, and I understand that this could be a concern of yours. Let's talk about it, and let's bring Miss Julie or Mr. Sammy in on this conversation and see if we can get some ideas. So once again, we're not validating the actual incident. We're validating the feelings and concerns. Okay. Now, we've gotten our kids talked to. We've helped our parents become fairly effective in talking to their children. That was a very brief overview, but quite frankly, if just the application of those few ideas were applied in a lot of step families, you would see a dramatic improvement in the communication process between biological parent and child. We as adults, sometimes we just have to take the step and be the adult in the relationship. And yeah, a conversation is going to be uncomfortable sometimes, but that's okay. We'd rather have an uncomfortable conversation right now where we have a chance for resolution than an uncomfortable conversation in the future where there's no chance for resolution. Now we're going back to mom and dad, stepmom, biological dad, biological mom, stepdad. Now you guys are together and you're starting to see you're being challenged by your own communication processes. And what are some ideas we can give and some skill sets we can share with our step parents to help them be better communicators in their relationship so they do have a loving, productive relationship? Well, first thing we want to tell our step parents and the parents is we have to find the right time to talk about specific issues. In the world of communications, we got what's called small talk. Small talk can be done at any time, and the reason they call it small talk is just for that reason. It really doesn't require any decisions to be made. It's more just to start gathering information. A lot of times we'll see small talk in the morning. The family's getting up, we're getting our coffee, we're getting our breakfast, we're doing the Pop-Tarts. Mom and Dad are in the kitchen. Mom will ask Dad, what time are you going to be home tonight? Dad will say, about the regular time. Dad will say, you got any big plans today? Mom will say, yeah, you know, I got to go meet with Sally's teacher, but it's really nothing more than to talk about a class project they're working on. Okay, that's good. Kids, what's happening? Really, not much, Dad, not much, Mom. Sally might say, I'm going to be hanging out with Julie this afternoon at her house. They'll be at 5. But anyway, small talk can be done at any time because it is just that. It really doesn't require any type of decisions to be made, and it's more just to bring everybody up to speed of what's going on. Now, there's also the talk that does have the decisions to be made, and this is the type of talk that we're talking, the ground rules today, is these are the type of talks we have to have in our relationships at times where we have to make decisions. We have to talk about issues. We have to come to resolution on issues. And so the first one that we were talking about and going back to is pick the right time. We have to find a time to bring up difficult issues. Now, while it says here there's no perfect time to raise a difficult issue, some times are more appropriate than others. Again, examples are you're not going to want to talk about a difficult issue or an issue that requires a major decision right before you go to bed and go to sleep. You're not going to do it when one of the spouses just walks in the door from work and is trying to unwind. You're not going to do it when there is chaos going on all around you. So we want to use care in determining what those times may be. Put in there, try to pick a time when you and your partner are free of other distractions. In this world, I think we all would be in agreement that, that seems like almost an impossibility, that there's distractions going on all around us. Our cell phones are going off. Our text messages are going off. The TV has, what was it, the James Taylor song that used to talk about 199 channels on and nothing to see. And we just have distraction around us all the time. So a lot of times we just have to make that time. And, it's almost like if you were going to make an appointment with anybody else, if one of the spouses has an important issue or a difficult issue they need to talk about, it's okay to say to the other spouse, we need to talk about something. When would be a good time for you? And then when you guys find a mutually agreed upon time, go and do it. Now, another red flag that would happen here is if one spouse or the other says, I can talk to you at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, you know, it's Saturday, we'll both be home, all the kids will be at the pool, it'll be quiet. And then when 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon comes by, if you don't honor that time, once again, you've lost the trust of that partner that they'll be available in the future. But even more importantly, what does that message send to the partner who says, I have something important to do? Or I'm sorry, I have a difficult discussion to have with you, or I have an issue I need to raise with you, and you say you're going to meet with them at a certain time and then don't honor it. That, again, dismisses the value that they have in that issue and basically their value too. So the time should be when both you and your partner can approach it positively and give your full attention. And again, when we talk about positively, it has to be, if one of the partners already has something planned for Saturday at 3 o'clock, that they told Joe that they were going to help Joe tune the car, or Mary said she was going to go over to Sally's house and help her with some work over there, then we should not expect to say, can we meet at 3 o'clock tomorrow? And they say, no, I already have something to do tomorrow. You remember I was going to Joe's house, and to expect it to be received positively if you start pushing it. So when we find that time that both parties can get together and positively give their full attention, then we found the right time. Some examples again are just this. You know, it's not during a favorite TV show, not as I said, not immediately coming home from work, or during another scheduled activity. And then as a speaker, if you're initiating the discussion, you can gauge what's the most appropriate time may be simply by asking your partner when is a good time to discuss an important issue. Now, a lot of times in our communication process and the skill set we so poorly do is we'll have an issue come up, and we can use the other word conflict if you want, because conflict is a legitimate word and conflict does happen. And actually, I'll even go as far as to say conflict is good when it's handled in a healthy way, because conflict is what creates positive change within the dynamics of relationships. But again, the key there is when it's handled in a healthy way, that an issue could be brought up, and it would be okay to say, you know what, I'm just too frustrated, I'm just too mad, I'm just too aggravated right now to take this further. And how much healthier is that within the family dynamics for that to be said and received from one partner to the other, saying, I can't talk about it right now, I'm just too mad, I will talk to you tomorrow about it, instead of bringing in the conflict that is not handled in a healthy way, where we start hearing our voices being raised. And the reason we were, you know, it's common sense, the reason we raise our voices in conflict is because we don't think we're being heard. But we're also now setting very unhealthy patterns for our children, if they are around the house, to see how to handle conflict, thinking that raising voices and arguing in detrimental ways is the way to do it, when in fact we could show them that there is a model to handle issues, conflict, or discussions that can be done in a healthy way, and where mom and dad still can do it but show love and respect for each other. So what does it mean when I put up there how you start is how you finish? Well, we'll talk about it. It says the way in which the speaker raises an issue is often a big predictor of how the discussion will go. If you begin a conversation in a harsh way by attacking or blaming your partner, you are likely to have an angry discussion. So what we're saying, it's important that we help our couples understand that when they're communicating and having challenges in communicating, that they avoid creating an environment where the listener feels they need to defend themselves rather than simply discuss. If we are going to be put in a position where we have to defend ourselves, and let's go back to this idea of listening real quick. We want to work with our couples, and when we talk to them about the listening skill, and we're going to talk about this in just a second, but I want to bring it up right now, is they do have to tune in completely to what their partner is saying. And if they're being put on the defense immediately, what's going through their head? And we know what's going through their head is going to be a reply or a response to what they heard in defense of what they heard. So they cannot effectively listen to their partner if their minds are already coming up with defenses as to what's being said. So as the last sentence says, in these cases, your message is not being heard because the listener is too busy defending themselves, and we all will do that. So we want to soften the way you begin a conversation with a calm, positive approach, which will increase the likelihood that the communication will be viewed as non-threatening. Let's emphasize this with our parents, that it is so important that they understand that their communication has to be seen as non-threatening. Many times in my counseling practice, I'll hear these stories of where one of the spouses will say, "Why did you not ever tell me that?" or "Why did you not talk to me about that?" And the other one will just come out and say, I already knew what your reaction was going to be, and for me it was easier at the time just to avoid the discussion because I knew your reaction was going to be, and whatever it is, threatening, negative, and we want to make sure we create an environment for our partner and ourselves to feel safe in the communication process. It says, a non-threatening or safe communication environment will make the discussion seem worth participating in to the listener. And when they say think of a soft beginning where your words and tones are free of criticism or attack, and some examples I'll give you right now of harsh and soft beginnings. A harsh beginning is, "You didn't put gas in the car, and I was late for work this morning." Now, the soft beginning would be, "I appreciate it when you put gas in my car, but when you can't do that for me, let me know so that I can make time to stop before work." I think we all will see how the same message is being conveyed, but the way it's going to be received is going to be completely different in both scenarios. And one of the aspects of psychology we know, as men especially, there's we're probably all familiar with that work, love and respect, but that work was done because through the studies they show that men desire respect really more than anything else. And the respect we mean is the kind of respect that we get by having someone, and our kids and our wives, speak words of encouragement to us and kindly, or as they say here, in the soft beginning. Now, the other side of that is the love side, which says, okay, we as men, if we feel like we're not getting the respect we need from our families, the love side is women who are created more emotionally than men, and what I mean by that is just that, they say in this book and the studies that they don't feel like they're being loved. Now, can you imagine how much more your wife or the wife would feel loved if we used soft beginnings and were able to frame our issues in a way that conveyed love versus harsh beginnings that, again, were non-loving words? So just this little tweak in how we start our conversations is an amazing feature as to also how to address this concept of love and respect in a marriage. Speak for yourself. Stick to talking about how you, the speaker, feels. We also want to describe the issue at hand rather than stating what we may assume to be or observe the problem with your partner. Okay, so what does this all mean? Real quickly, what we're talking about is, first of all, talk about you and how you feel. Go back to that idea, the example we just used on the car not being filled up with gas or not leaving gas in it. It could even go as, hon, if you know, she said, I appreciate you when you do fill up the car with gas, but we could also be saying, this morning when I went to go to work, I was running 15 minutes late already, and I got in the car, and it was on empty. I really am concerned about that because, first of all, I wasn't even sure I had enough gas to get to the gas station, and this really makes me feel uncomfortable, just my security itself, because I know that you need to sleep in another hour since you work later at night, and it's not uncommon that I will notice that you'll turn your phone off before you go to bed, so I knew I would have no way to get any help if I couldn't, if I ran out of gas. So as long as we're talking from the I perspective, people are going to have a hard time arguing with that because, and when I say arguing, it's having an issue with that because you're talking about how I feel. Just real quickly, an example, it was real interesting, but I worked with a couple of years ago, and I want to keep this as short as possible, but it was a good example of how it worked. They were both remarried. It was a step-family situation. The male in the family loved cats and had a bunch of cats. The female in the family was not a big advocate of pets in general, but especially was not a big advocate of cats. And so the agreement they came to was that, when they got married, he would be the one that would be responsible for the care and the upkeep of the cats. Well, it got to the point they got married. She would come home from work. The first thing she'd do when she walked in the door would notice the smell of the litter box not being cleaned out. So it actually brought them into counseling. And what we were able to do to come to resolution to it, but where we're going with this, is she was able to, instead of attack him, she would share just that. She would say, Alfonso will use, because I know I've never had a client by the name of Alfonso. I'll walk in the door, and the first thing I do is I will smell the litter box, and I know that the cat litter hasn't been cleaned out. Alfonso, when we first got married, I heard you say that you would take care of the cats. So all she's doing is that she's using her five senses. She's sharing with her partner from her sense of smell, her sense of touch, taste, that any of the hearing, of the five senses, we want to share what we see. We want to use our five senses and share that with our partner, how this applies to the issue. And then now, as I say to the rest of the story, basically what happened was the resolution came that they did come to a collaborative resolution, and she worked many miles from where the house was, and he was independently or self-employed, so he had his own hours, and he was always home before she was. So the simple solution or resolution to this was they agreed that when she would leave the office, she would call and let him know that she was on the way, because he would say a lot of times that, I was outside, I was working around the yard, I'm sorry, I just forgot. Before I knew it, it was dark, you were home, I didn't get a chance. And so they actually came up with a couple of things that they were able to solve. Is she was able to call, he would say, oh, by the way, since you're out of the office now, we need cat litter or we need cat food or whatever. And it was something that got to the point that was creating so much problems for them, they had to go to counseling for it. But the solution was so simple that it actually was resolved quickly, and not only did it resolve that issue, but they resolved a couple of other issues when they started talking from self. Use the words I and me to describe things from your point of view. And as we all well know, beginning a conversation with a you statement can feel like an attack or an attempt to blame the listener. So homework, they say, the I statement, I get frustrated when I come, if we're going to give this as homework to our clients, the I statement is, I get frustrated when I come home from work and the kitchen is messy. This statement conveys a feeling of frustration about a messy house. The you statement, you don't ever clean up after yourself. What have you been doing all day is basically how this message is received. And this statement assigns blame on the listener for the messy house, and it attacks the listener by implying that they are lazy. We want to also help our parents, now husband and wife we're talking to, learn to be short and to the point in their communication process. Let's try to tackle one issue at a time. And I know just in counseling in general, and you guys have seen the same thing, you'll be told that they're coming in to talk about this issue, and before you know it, they have now brought up 26 issues that they want to talk about. So our job is to give them the skill set to remember that they're just going to talk about one issue at a time, and that we want to help them to learn how to keep their points specific to the issue, observations, or feelings, and are only those things that are happening currently. We don't want to start going back to 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, or even 4, 5, 6, 7 days ago, if it's not relevant to the issue being spoke about. If they're talking about a money issue regarding the use of a credit card or spending a certain thing, then we're not going to go back and say, well, I remember 3 years ago you bought that fishing rod and never talked to me about it. We want them to keep it current because we already know they've discussed that. Yet this history seems to be a challenge that a lot of couples have, is the forgetting of the history sometimes. If it's been resolved, it's been resolved. Do not include negative comments that attack the other. Again, we would be thinking, well, this is pretty self-explanatory and makes common sense. But I also know that you've all been in sessions with your congregants and are just shocked sometimes as to some of the things that are said to and about each other in front of each other. And so nothing good is ever accomplished. And we want to convey this as we're helping and doing this counseling with our couples, is to leave the negativity out of it. It's amazing in life. We'll say things to our spouse we wouldn't even say to our worst enemy. And they recognize that sometimes, but they also don't recognize that we do this because of the familiarity we have with them. And we just want to, again, reemphasize some of the scriptures that talk about how cutting words can be, or how affirming words can be, and that we want to be sure we're on the affirmation side. This example, the following statement of a person: "You were such a jerk last night." It says a more positive alternative would be, "My feelings were hurt last night when you left." It describes specific feelings as a result of the event. So again, notice it wasn't a you statement. It's not an attacking statement. This person is just sharing what their feelings were and what happened when this other person left, whatever the circumstances were. We want to help them understand that they need to explain their feelings and concerns simply, avoiding the temptation to use long, drawn-out description of things. If we can get to the point quicker, the listener has more manageable information to use. And again, we, the men in the relationships, a lot of times we are not real good about keeping tuned in once things start getting off topic, because we as men genetically are designed to be fixers, meaning tell me what's wrong, tell me what would make it right, let me fix it. Women are emotional beings, and we have to help our couples understand this. They need to connect everything on the emotional side, which again takes more words sometimes. But what happens is when women are trying to connect the emotionality to it with men who are fixers and just want to know what the problem is and how to fix it, it actually works against them, because they now have a greater chance of losing the entire point of the issue. And it just, again, as a quick example of how this looks, one of the local pastors in one of his sermons a while back was talking about a member of his church recently had a baby, and, you know, they went out, of course, they heard about it, but it was fairly recent, and he hadn't had a chance to really talk to the new mom much, if any, and then he was out, and she was out, and the baby was home with the dad, and she was picking up some stuff at the grocery store, and he bumped into her, and, you know, he told her how glad he was to see her, and how excited they were about the baby, and he got home, and he told his wife that he ran into this person, and, you know, she seems to be doing well, and the wife said, well, do they have a boy or a girl? And he said, you know what, I don't know. Well, how's she doing? But the point of this conversation is, this is how men and women are. Men want to get to the point. He saw the mom was doing good, the baby was doing good, the dad was doing good, so to him, the world was good. The wife, who needs to connect life more emotionally, needed to know the details. Was it a boy or girl? How's she doing? Are there any problems? What can we do for them? So when women and men understand how we operate, it's interesting to see how they become much more effective communicators, because they're communicating in a way that their partner understands. Okay, and again, it provides them with a chance to show that they understand the point that's being brought across. Being brief keeps the listener engaged in the discussion and makes them less likely to tune out. Now, as we close up today, the last thing we want to talk about is the concept, it's not safe to assume, or we may have heard it described as being a mind reader. And nobody is a mind reader out there. It says you might think that because a person knows you, they know that you're thinking or feeling. So if we make assumptions, when we make assumptions, it's dangerous in any type of communication. Pastors, I'm going to share this with you again, because I know you understand this better than anything. I'll sit in a session and I'll have someone tell me and say, I don't think Pastor Smith or Pastor Jones likes me. And I'll say, well, why do you say that? And say, well, I was at church and I walked by and I said hi to him and he didn't even look up and talk to me. Well, already you know what's happening. This congregant's already making these assumptions that Pastor Jones, Pastor Smith doesn't like them because they didn't acknowledge them in a hallway of people. And, I'm sharing with this client that, more than likely Pastor Smith and Pastor Jones was either thinking about the sermon or how the service went today, or they may be getting ready to go into a counseling session that's going to be tough for them. They may be getting ready to go into a counseling session with a couple that's talking about divorce. But don't assume that just because you were not acknowledged or they didn't seem to see you, that they don't like you. And we do this a lot in our relationships, is we'll start making assumptions. Well, you must not like how I, and that's the furthest thing from the truth, because we haven't asked them. So again, what may be obvious to you may not be obvious to the listener. We want to communicate in specifics using examples of situations if necessary. Give your listener a frame of reference for what you describe. And again, don't forget to begin the discussion gently and speak for yourself using the I statements as described earlier in the presentation or above, while keeping the issues to the point and simple. When we talk about specifics and frames of references, that would be the same thing. Now, if this congregant felt it was necessary to go talk to this specific Pastor Jones or Pastor Smith, had they not come into counseling or had a place to process it, hopefully they would have said, Pastor Jones, have I done something to offend you? Because Sunday when I was walking down the hall and you were walking to your office, I said hi to you and you didn't even acknowledge me. And it was, right after service. So now they've given Pastor Jones or Pastor Smith the specifics and the frame of reference. And then you know what Pastor Jones or Pastor Smith is going to say is, oh, Sally, I am so sorry. I didn't even notice you. I was on my way to a meeting with the deacons, or I was doing this. I apologize. But if they just came in and said, Pastor Jones, Pastor Smith, I don't think you like me. Poor Pastor Jones, Pastor Smith are going to sit there and say, whoa, why is this? Finally, stop, pause, and listen. After you've done your best to follow the speaker's rules to get your message across, we want to help our couples understand that they need to, same thing, paraphrase or summarize what they've heard said. Again, they do not parrot. They've paraphrased. Bob, every time I tell you we're going to have this social event coming up, you always get home from the office late. Sally, what I just heard you say is that you see me getting home from the office late every time you think, or every time you share with me we're going to have this social event. Sally, you always walk out when I'm talking. And again, the world of technology, but we'll get this through. So we just want to paraphrase, not parrot, but paraphrase and summarize what we said. And that also gives them a chance to either say, I do understand or I don't understand. Sally, every time you do this specific thing, it comes out blue. Okay, Bob, so whenever I do this, it comes out pink. No, Sally, I said it comes out blue. Oh, I'm sorry, Bob, it comes out blue. Okay, so the only way to know your listener accurately received your message is to pause and give the listener a chance to respond back to you. We want to help our couples understand this response will not include their opinion about what you said. They're simply going to restate in their own words what you have just shared. It's not uncommon to learn that what we think we said was actually heard much differently by the listeners. And again, especially for the pastors that are listening to this, I know you can relate to this 110%, that you'll say something to someone in the congregation and they'll get back to you that the pastor said. Because a lot of times in life, too, if we don't go through this process, we filter our communication and we'll make it something we want to hear. And I know in my counseling practice and when you're out working with these step families, they'll say something, and if we don't give them a chance to restate it so we can make sure they understand and clarify it, they're going to hear what they want you to, they think they want you to say. So this is the one skill set that will be very effective in helping make sure what is said is the same thing as what is heard. Having the listener repeat what you've shared gives them a chance to know where the message came across, as we just discussed, and also gives everyone an opportunity for corrections and clarifications. Then when it's all done and over, let's move on. Once you know the message was understood, and if you're communicating a conflict, use the rules to develop a solution-based or common ground and things that can be improved the situation. Just as I shared with you that example of the couple that had the cats. You may be able to resolve an issue simply by discussing it or saying, we agreed to disagree. If you identify a conflict that needs to be resolved, schedule time to discuss it using the skills we just talked about. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to fix the conflict, only that you both agree on ways that you can live with the conflict. And then at this point, we want to share with our couples that it may be time to repair the hurt feelings and ask for forgiveness or offer forgiveness. Do so in ways that the partner appreciates, take time to do these things, and once completed the process, as they say, move on, because again, if we keep bringing up the past as a way to control, and that's what it really is all about, is when we hold the past over somebody, we're thinking we're holding control over them. And so we want our couples, when we're working with them, and they're coming in saying, we are having challenges in our communication process, and we cannot get our conflicts resolved, keep your ears open to just this specific issue. If they keep bringing up the past, we need them to put a demark in the ground right then and there and agree that that's not going to be relevant to the discussion going forward. It may have affected what got them to that point, but from that point on, we're looking for resolution, not going back and redoing the conflict. And again, here's my contact information for additional questions or comments as they come up. And again, Marshall, I appreciate the time and hopefully some ideas on how to help our congregants and members and attenders when they come to us regarding communications, some ideas we can share with them on how to be better communicators between husband and wife and parent and child.
Thank you so much, Rick. We look forward to your next session. And folks, I hope you realize at the bottom of the screen you can pause this video, scroll down at any time, ask a question, make a comment, communicate with us, and then unpause your video to be able to continue watching it. Rick, you did a great job. Appreciate so much. You're helping us with this, and we look forward to your next session.